Good morning to each and every one of you. We can wait for the theme music to subside. Just to say good morning to you, Marcia Agard and Rastaman, Mandy Cummins, Wayne Liddell. Good to have all of you on the live this morning. So many of you, Gwyneth Anderson, Humi, Yonet, Yvette, Teresa, good to have you as well. Guys, it's a privilege and a pleasure as usual to be here with you guys another day. It's Wednesday, the 21st day of May. We're heading so fast to the end of the month. You know, it's important how a nation treats its children. It's tremendously important. And we're going to examine some of that this morning. How we've been treating our children. You know, it's one thing to talk the talk. How we treat our teachers too. It's important. You know, they're who are molding the minds of the nation. We like to say it, but is it that in actuality, in practice, how we treat them? You know, do we support that in how we treat our teachers? How a nation treats its children. It's important. Justice for Adriana Young. Justice for Adriana Young. Gwyneth Anderson, good to have you on the live this morning. Who, me? Yvette Gordon, good to have you. Robin Kendall, we see you there as well. Janice Champagne. Good, it's fantastic. I have a name like that. Champagne Collision. Good to have you there. I see Rudolph is with us. Jansen. Good to have all of you folks. Mornus Toby. Rudolph says, hold up. Rudolph says he's joining us from the capital of the US of A, Washington, DC. Folks, it doesn't get any better than that. Rudolph, thank you so much. It is people like Rudolph that puts international in our name. Please and thank you. We can see we're an international program. We got folks from Maryland, Washington, you know, Baltimore, New Jersey, you know, the islands joining us, folks, north, south, you know, joining us. Thanks to you guys. You know, we can safely say we're in a national morning program. Jolly Anderson is with us too. Guys, happy to have all of you here with us. How are you all doing, Myrna? How are you doing, Dolly, and all our other special folks who are joining us? Happy and delighted to have all of you special people on the live this morning. Y'all know how we say it. On the live. Folks, yesterday morning I had the privilege of touching base with my friend Tabitha See how she's doing, you know, she forsake us. Uh-huh. She forsake us like that one Charita. Forsook us. Forsook us. Yeah, that's how they did. You know. I think he got a friend. They say if you want a friend in politics, buy a dog, eh? These colleagues of mine, they make that known every day. Amanzo Walton is here too. She's another one. Amanzo, your name calling, right? Liddy, how are you doing? Is Liddy or Letty? Same thing, both are two. I prefer Letty. Letty has a certain oomph to it. Lester, good morning to you, my brother. Rena Mars, Rastaman. You know, it ain't gonna go right if you got a Rastaman. It's not gonna go right if you don't have a Rastaman. How's Mr. Charles doing? In here for a minute, a little bit. Vashti Pollard is here as well. Jilly G, of course, is here. Jilly G telling Rastaman good morning. Like I short. You know when when you were younger. When we were younger, us big, we gotta stick together. When we were younger, right, you remember starting to talk to an elder without saying good morning or something like that. You just start talking. Thank you. Well, the tea now come. You can't get good help these days. Right? Lady Bird and Shahan at the same time. The tea now come. You can't. Big people say, good morning. You just start talking. With the breakfast there. And then the big auntie and the big uncle that we have become say, good morning. And then you catch yourself and say, morning, Muds. Morning, ma'am. Morning, mommy. Morning, daddy. Like I'm not even here. Or next thing they used to say, like you wake up in the same bed. You ever get that? Ain't gonna be your own house, you know. Sometimes in your workplace. Soon as you land in by the door, we left the file again. Wait, you jump into work mode. You know. Person would respond, like you wake up in the same bed. Guyanese big on the coaches seats, you know. You all try with that. You know, I learned the hard way. Very hard way. We had a protest at the University of Guyana when I was a student leader there. I was student president. Y'all think I just dropped, you know. When I was student leader, I got some Tetley tea here. Black this morning. Things brown. You know, people are sending the donations like they used to. Things brown. Some black Tetley. Sometimes that's the good thing. Hope y'all can see the steam in that. The lady bring it. My aunt would say, piping hot. You know, like we wake up in the same bed. We began with courtesies. So we had a student protest. We locked the main gate at the campus. We weren't letting anybody in, demanding, you know, improvement in the conditions at the university again. All this on the PVP, mind you, pre-2015. All this on the PVP. Right? I was student president at UG 2009, 2010. All before 2015, protesting for better services, better conditions for our students. We locked the main gate of the campus, and remember there was a lecturer who was an exchange with university. They were visiting from Ohio State University, I think it was, and you know she was trying to get in. That morning it rained, but we were adamant. You know, we don't back down weather. Right? Y'all think it's now we jumping on fences and so on. You know, y'all think it's now people telling me pull back, and so on. Y'all think it's now. So the lady trying to get in the compound, because they had some accommodations on campus, living accommodations, and she was trying to get on campus, and she came up to me, and she said, you know, I'm not part of this, in her lovely American accent. I'm not part of this. I'm just visiting, and I'd like to get in. And we stood our ground. We said, no, all for one for all. You know, we all in this struggle together. When I said that, this lady, this lecturer on exchange, she took off with some expletives. Beatrice, you had no courtesies there. She took off with some expletives, right? Rena, she took off with some expletives, boy, right? You know, so After that, I just didn't respond to that. She was cussing. She, you know, in American accent. So uh, incidentally, I was reading communication studies at that time at University of Ghana, and so she was a lecturer in the communication studies center. In the communication center, she was a lecturer on exchange. So I was complaining to the head of department then, who is now the vice chancellor of the University of Guyana, the department head. I said, Doc, Dr. Mohammed, this lady cussed me up, you know. What kind of thing is that for a lecturer to be cussing up a student? Yeah, I think it's now. Yeah, I think it's now. It's long now. You know, but Dr. Mohammed said something to me. This is what I want to get to. We started about courtesy. That was instructive. Right? Two things Dr. Mohammed said to me that was very instructive as a student. I'll tell you the first one now. She said, the lady don't owe you no courtesy, sir. If the lady says, good morning, fair enough, right? There's no law that says she got to say good morning to you. you know, what I was complaining about is that I engaged her really and truly subsequent to that protest. And the lady would watch it. I'd be talking to the lady, watching me with a blank stare and just walk on. I say good morning, the lady passed me straight. This is the lecturer. So I was complaining to the head of the communications, and I said, this lady, you know, Doc said she's under no obligation. that that kind of opened me up, you know. She's under no obligation to tell you good morning. There isn't a statute at the university, a rule or regulation that says she has to tell you good morning. I said to myself, wow. You know, because I grew up, when somebody said good morning, you got to say good morning. Much less you grew up in the country. Much less grew up in the country. When I'm by my mother-in-law in Bobis, people passing outside, nobody's in the front, you know. People still shouting out, good morning, cousin, something. I said, but nobody outside. People still, country people, they're just passing the house, you know. Right? Because we have the morning. And Stacy, morning, Stacy. Nobody knows. Different. So I was complaining. I seen the lady face to face saying morning. The lady just passed me straight. Doc says she's under no obligation. That thing did a number of me, Mandy. From then, people say morning or not. I say my morning. I ain't even waiting for the good morning. People say, I say good morning and they're not the head, you gone on. But we grew up say, like you wake up in the same bed. Wake up with courtesies. The second thing that was instructive. That now Vice Chancellor of the university told me when I was a student. But it wasn't me in particular. She was a lecture theater. And this can be instructive for a lot of y'all. This can be instructive. Sheila Boy said it can be instructive. So I give you number one. All right, number one. Number two. She said to us as students, look, this university got a lot of challenges. She wasn't vice chancellor then. Boy, has the university improved. The university has improved. So she's telling us, she's head of department, she's talking to us. She said, look, this university got a lot of challenges, right? Listen to me carefully now. She said got a lot of challenges. She said because of that, sometimes because the challenges are mutual among students, right? Shared struggle. I remember the days of fetching furniture from one lecture theater to the next, you know. Lecture theater packed to capacity, you got fight, you got plunging, GWLT door, you know how? with your chair in hand and your bag in the next. Your chair in one hand and your bag in the next. The good old days, place hot like hell. Folks, you could have make it in GWLT. You could make it anyway. When you make it on GWLT stage, you know, you're well suited. You're well suited for life's adversities. You go on in there as a student leader or running for student office, and you got among the stage and talk to your fellow student, you better get it together. They'd make a mess of you. You know, I survived that stage many times. You know, if you can make it, then you can be something in this life. So the second thing she told me that was instructive, told us, she said, look, because of the struggles you have in the student life, you gotta push for this and push for that, right? Sometimes you meet somebody of the other gender, right? And you might start feeling a certain way for them because you all have this shared experience. Marlene, Sheena, Pauline, right? You all have this shared experience, Dolly. She says, not love. this is what the head department. She says, not love. She said it's traumatic bonding. She said, because of the shared experience, some of y'all see some people, you said, this is my husband here. You know, this is my wife here. You don't come to Eugene for that. She says, not love. Traumatic. Traumatic bonding. Traumatic bonding. I was the exception. Well, not so much, because I met my wife on campus, but we didn't hit it off there as post-campus life. Post, you know, she saw me, my wife saw me and fell deeply in love with me. I was focused on student government, focused on academic studies, you know, and she fell in love with me. Still afterwards, I finished, you know, graduated from communication studies, graduated from law. And then I said, all right, I got some time on my hand now. Some people and some girls will tell a different story, right? Whose report will you believe? I was focused, laser focused. When I was done with that, I, you know, rekindled, re-engaged with my wife, and we met afterwards, and we hit it off better. Second time around. But that being said, good morning. That's what I meant to say. Long intro just to say that. Good morning, Leon. Good morning, Joseph. So, what some of y'all think is love, Marlene, might be traumatic bonding. Trauma is the root word there. Traumatic. Yeah. Shared experience, you think is love. You know, it's traumatic bonding. It didn't. Number me, I still wonder a lot of days. Is this thing for real, or is Michelle? You know, y'all can't see y'all learned something this morning. Courtesy, there's no law. People say good morning or not. There's no law on that. And then what you think might be love is traumatic bonding. Y'all done get y'all money's worth already for this program already. Oh yeah, y'all don't pay that. At least not as consistent as you should. Sharmila Edgel joining us from Kukwani. Sharmila, what you think might be love, girl? Traumatic bonding. Gotta get an amen, folks. Gotta get an amen this morning. Please and thank you. Could we get an amen? Folks, you all know we used to be big on donations. We can't ease up now because sometimes we hear ourselves asking for it and we're annoying our own self. But this morning, as I get your attention on that, we don't run out of water. Elizabeth, sometimes we think is love is traumatic bonding. Courtesy is not regulated. It's not codified. Please and thank you. Elizabeth says better late than never. Right? Better late than ever. Journey with Margaret. Margaret said passing straight this morning. From now on, I'm passing you straight. There's no law. How are you going to vex you, Margaret? Knowing what I know. Elizabeth said you better learn a couple of things late than never. Better late than never. Good morning, folks. Well, I started the morning, try to start you all on a soft note because I know people got blood pressure problem, big foot problem, all kinds of things. I didn't want to, you know, throw you all in the deep end of the pool. You know, and I shouldn't even say that lightly this morning either, because we got to touch on that. The way a nation treats its kids, it matters, you know. The way we treat each other. If we can't treat the children right, how are we going to treat each other right? You know, I don't know if you guys know it, but 2 years ago, today was a fateful morning. I woke up in disbelief. You know, no, it wasn't in no confidence motion. That was 3 years prior to the 2 years. Not a story by itself. 2 years ago, I woke up to the news, like many of you, that there was a massive fire in Region 8, Madhya. I was in disbelief when I heard 3 deaths, 4 deaths, 5. What? How can 5 people? And then the numbers kept climbing. 6, 7. How can this amount of persons die in one fire? It was mind-boggling. And folks, the issues that have flowed from that, Madia female dormitory fire, has left little to be desired. You know, the government subsequently went in there, tried to buy off the silence of the parents, $5 million. And now there's a class action lawsuit taking the government to court. $5 million. Y'all remember how those kids were paraded? Those that survived were flown to Georgetown and were patients at the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation. Y'all remember when they were discharged for a photo op? Y'all remember that? Y'all remember when they told us that every minister was assigned to a child? What has ever happened with that? What has ever happened with that? I had the privilege a year and a half ago of going to Madia and visiting what I think is sacred ground. Now, this is the Madia Secondary School, and if you go left and a little down, a gentle incline, or a gentle descent, you get to the Madia Secondary School female dormitory, which is shown here. You see the water tank scorched by that fire. 20 dead in the worst fire we've had in our nation's history on the watch of the People's Progressive Party Civic. 20 dead. The minister would subsequently say that she had a report in her desk that she passed on to somebody in which fire prevention measures or mitigation measures were prescribed for this dormitory. I walked this ground. I have never had the courage to show this before because I relived the memory of that fateful morning. I stood on this ground and I told Elizabeth, what was the church in North Carolina where they had that gruesome shooting? I remember visiting that church. Is it AME Zion? I remember visiting that church and my skin growing. It's the same way I walked around this building a year and a half ago. My skin growing. Just imagining the horrors. Those 20 kids was more than that. Some escaped the fire. Some of those, imagining what some of those kids went through trying to escape this dorm. You know, the screams the guard told us that morning we visited. The screams, she says she still hears the screams of those kids. She was crying to us. She still hears the screams of those kids in this building on the PPP's watch. She still hears the screams. You see that wall there? You see that hole there? It's where they were trying to break the wall so the kids can come out. You see the grills on the window? That hole is where the AME Zion AME Church, Mother Emmanuel AME Church. Thanks, Elizabeth. You see those holes next to the windows? It's where residents and first responders try to break the wall to get those kids out. I don't think I've ever shown this video before. I didn't have the courage until today. Those holes by the window is where residents try to break the wall because the doors of the dormitory was locked. From the outside, I believe, those kids inside, that fire raging, Some of the first responders we spoke to said when they were pulling kids through those holes in the wall, the skin were peeling off because of the burns. Where are those kids now? This government don't care. I'm sure if you go on that site, you'd see a pile of rubble 2 years later. Nothing should be rebuilt there. The boys' dormitory is next door. But nothing should be built there. This should be or rather, the only thing that should be built here is a memorial to these kids on this ground. But the people will want to be reminded of that. The way a nation treats its children matters. 20 kids, 20 children, Guyanese children lost their lives. And to this day, 2 years later, nobody has been held accountable. They're trying to say it's a 15-year-old who was heartbroken, lit the fire, and a whole number of things. Right? That is still going through the court system. Still, of course, there are other schools of thought. And I see some of you expressing that here even now. You know, my skin growing me now even watching this video. We stood at that ground silently, talking with the folks on the ground, talking with residents there, you know, and in our own humble way, reflecting on the lives of the 20 lost. We saw what the heat and fire did to the beds in this place. How the heat twisted the metal of these bed frames. And we could only imagine what that kind of heat might do to flesh and bones. You know, twisted those beds. Look, such a frame right here. Twisted those metal. Imagine those children, 20, lost their life. Who's sharing their life this morning? This is the reminder of the people we don't want, you know. They don't want to remember this. The same way they don't want to remember, they want to turn the page on Adriana Young. And we would all be culpable. We would all be complicit if we allow them to. We cannot let these issues die. The Madia female dormitory fire is on the ballot. The Madia female dormitory fire is on the ballot in this general and regional elections. And if you think them boys have handled it well, you vote for them. You let a rock and coming back. If you think they have done well, it's on the ballot. Folks, it is on the ballot. It is on the ballot. The way a nation treated its children, it matters. The way a nation treats its children matters. And believe it or not, Rihanna Mingo, Sandra Hanover, the person with the Clouds 592 handle, we see you there as well. Folks, it matters. It should matter. Right? It should matter. Believe it or not, we are 2 days shy of 1 month since Adriana Young went missing. 11-year-old Adriana Young. We are 2 days shy of 1 month. And it could be 2 years, just like the Madia secondary school female dormitory fire. And we could still be calling for justice, because this is what obtains with the PPP. This is what no stone left unturned look like. The Henry Boys was September 2020. The Henry Boys mangled, mutilated bodies were found. September 2020, we still crying out for justice. They said Quindon Bacchus had a gun fired on police. Right? And then in the court matter, they found this gun, whether he had it or not, it wasn't even working. So how could he fire on police? or in Boston was shot dead in his bed, committed no crime. The police, the SWAT team found nothing criminal on the premises. His family still asking for justice. So we understand what no stone unturned looks like in this government. Now the family got to fight the government in court for justice. Can you imagine that? This should have been an easy international investigation. Well, perhaps it was, because we learned recently that the FBI was involved. What were their findings? What were their findings on the lock and key? On the lock and key. Folks, if the PPP end up in heaven, I want to go someplace else. If they end up in heaven, I gotta go someplace else. I can't picture it. I remember as a high school kid reading history. One of those history books, I ran into this analogy of why the slaves were reluctant to accept Christianity. They couldn't imagine them and the slave masters meeting in the same place. And that was one of the bases in which they were reluctant to accept Christianity. They couldn't fathom. You mean I got to see them again? Even in the next life? Huh? What is it? What is it? We remember the Mahdia 20 under the PPP's watch. We remember the Mahdia 20. In your quiet moment today, say a prayer for them. Can't be easy. I could imagine, right? Sometimes if our son who is with us, Sinzain, if he is at his grandparents for the weekend, sometimes you hear him in the house calling still. You imagine you hear him calling. Sometimes the house silent, and instinctively as a parent you call him, Sinzain. Then you remember, oh Lord, he my grandparent. You know, since as soon as kids go quiet, is something up. So you call out to him, hey. Then you realize, oh, I could imagine, you know, the parents of those kids calling out for them. There's an empty seat at the table. You know, there's an empty space in the community, in the village. Take $5 million and shut your mouth. The trauma. Take a 5 million, right? And sign a farm here that you wouldn't go forward with this matter. And they said they care. Priya Manikchan, a mother, you know, they care. Anil Nandalala, father. I know if this were on their doorstep, one of the Mahdia 20 was theirs, Adriana Young was theirs, they would go some way for the perpetrators. They would go some way for the intellectual authors. They would have been at every international forum crying out for justice. Saturday saw family mustn't cry out for justice for him. Same way. Huh? And all the others. Look at Adriana Young's parents, stricken, shrouded in grief. Shrouded in grief. The Henry boys' mothers, both of the mothers died from grief. They recover yet. They recover yet. They recover to this day. You know, remember them. There was an interesting forum. Thought you guys can benefit from some what was said. There was an interesting forum quite recently. I think Dr. Dexter Todd, the family attorney, Adriana Young's family attorney, pulled it together. Some international experts making the arguments on several fronts concerning drowning. These folks are experts in their respective fields, highly, highly respected people. And I thought some of what they've said, apart from the lots of the conjecture we get on social media, could be more instructive and might inform your own thinking and what you yourself might put out there on social media. I think it's tremendously insightful and instructive. Now, this is the framework or the theme was a medical legal perspective of drowning, a medical legal perspective of drowning, and they were very, 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 very tremendously very insightful in some of what they put forward in how we look at drowning cases. Elizabeth says the Henry boy's mothers died of a broken heart. I remember a friend of mine from church died young. She just gotten married, had an asthma attack and didn't recover from it. Right? Didn't recover from it. And I remember going over at her parents' house that night and seeing her mother. And I see somebody who looked like they aged 20 years in a few hours. Right? And in my humble estimation, that lady never recovered from that, just shrunk. That was the situation with the Joel and Isaiah Henry's mothers, consumed by grief. As Elizabeth said, died of a broken heart. Died of a broken heart. Right. Here is Dr. Dexter Todd introducing us to types of drowning, talking to us about types of drowning. Now, this is why I like to hear the experts, because it separates the sense from everything else. And I'm certain that you guys can be better informed by it. Take a look and take a listen. I think this was over the weekend. They put together this forum of experts from around the world on this subject matter of drowning. It's not just easy as you find a body in water, the person drowned, and it's perhaps because of their own volition. You know, right? Take a look and take a listen as we call this morning, reflecting on the lives of the Madhya 20, continuing the call for justice for Adriana Young and an international investigation. Take a look.
Some drowning. There is suicidal drowning, and there is accidental drowning, and then there is homicidal drowning. Now, a lot of what we're going to talk about is heading more down the line of homicidal drowning and the importance of it. All investigations, in order to investigate thoroughly a case of a homicidal drowning or suicidal or accidental, you will require a medical legal investigator, what we call an MDI. Now, what is this MDI? What is this person allowed to do? This person observes the scene and get information from the first responders, the persons who were on the scene at the time. They provide, of course, written documents, photo reports to the forensic pathologist to begin to give the forensic pathologist at the time of their examination some form of synopsis as to what had happened. Now, it is always very detailed. This investigator is always very detailed because they will have to look at the signs of drowning. They will have to look at the environment or the conditions which exists. They will have to look at the body position before movement. They will have to look, of course, whether there were any efforts of resuscitation of the person. And then they will have to be able to look to see whether we're dealing with wet or dry drowning. And from that, you'll be able to determine the state of the body and the clothing. that investigator will have to look at surveillance, whether there are cameras, etc., around. They will have to look at witnesses who observe and found the body and all the information coming from them as to what they recall from their observations. And of course, usually their question is asked, could the person swim, etc. Now, when we're dealing with drowning in natural environment, we're talking about, and when we talk about environment, natural environment, we're talking about pools, we're talking about bathtubs, etc. There is usually a very detailed examination of water temperature and, of course, condition. You may want to look at signs of intoxication. You may want to look at signs of bodily trauma. And of course, there must be, of course, at some scenes, it depends on the situation, you will have sometimes a visitation by the forensic pathologist on the scene to be able to assist the MDI in getting the truth as to what has happened. Now, each person or each expert involved in this type of investigation, of course, sometime or the other, appears in a court of law to give evidence as to what he or she did on the scene. And so scene examination becomes crucial for our consideration here. Now, at the initial action of drowning investigation, there is a requirement, or there is always a need for very careful investigation of the scene in which drowning took place. Now, this informs the drowning experts about the condition that the person drowned in and any other, whether there were any other third force, which was, of course, involved in the incident. So the examination of the scene is very important. Now, when we talk about water conditions, it's very important that the investigator look at the depth of the water that the person drowned in. They look at the current, whether, of course, if you're talking about drowning at high seas, etc., they will look at that. They will look at the temperature of the water. Was the water cold? Was the water hot? And of course, your forensic pathologist will say temperature of the water will, of course, have certain indications or indicators in relation to how one will expect the body to appear at the time of examination. And of course, whether on the body there are any physical signs of debris, etc. Now, surrounding environments are always important for the investigator. And this is also crucial in the process of examination. They will always have to look at whether there are any footprints or whether there are any drug marks, signs of evidence of struggle, or whether there are any personal effects on the victim, which of course will be, or taken off of the victim, which will be able to tell a particular story. Eyewitnesses are always important for this investigation. Witnesses' testimonies, of course, given saying exactly the history of the victim. They provide data regarding to whether or not they were accompanied by persons to the particular location, and of course, whether there were any help to determine, based on the story that they are given, whether there are any suspicion of foul play present or not. Now, examination of the victim is very important, and this is, of course, going to be dealt with more in depth by our pathologists, because dealing with the body or autopsy is a very important process in the investigation, and the forensic pathologist producing a report is expected to go to court of law and to give evidence in relation to the determined cause of death. Now, of course, as I said, autopsy will find a number of things, and I've just put this here for our consideration because it falls within the investigative process of drowning matters. Whether the autopsy will look for certain things, whether there is foam in the airways, whether there is water in the lungs, of course, whether there is any form of diatom test, which is, of course, or analysis, which was done to be able to assist, whether there are defense wounds. Remember, we're talking about the homicidal drowning here, whether there are any defense wounds or bruises, whether we're dealing with dry drowning or wet drowning. Now, of course, our chemical specialists will go into a lot about the toxicology and medical history, all right, and dealing with whether the test is able to determine whether there are drugs or any form of poisonous substance which is found in the body. And I'll leave this for our experts in relation to that.
Yeah. Some of what was said, folks, are that very, very important confabulation over the weekend with these experts. Very, very important. How many of you knew about wet drowning and dry drowning? Michelle Lewis, Andrew, Maxine Monroe, Dexter Solomon. That was new to me. You know, drowning is drowning for us. But the medical folks, the people, the scientific folks, the criminologists, the scientists, this is a science, folks. It is a science. And so in that forum, or during that forum, here is another expert talking and explicating the whole issue of wet drowning and dry drowning. It's very, very insightful. Very, very insightful. Take a look.
What is known as the wet drowning and dry drowning. Wet drowning is otherwise known as typical drowning, and then dry drowning is otherwise known as atypical drowning. So wet drowning can occur in the setting of salt water or fresh water. So the individual had actually ingested or inhaled some amount of water, and eventually get into the respiratory airway, make it waterlogged, somehow clog, and people can present with what is known as the typical drowning lungs, in which the lungs somehow looks edematous and is heavy. So for dry drowning essentially implies the person might have had some form of vasovagal syncope, and then in this case there is no actual ingestion of water in the respiratory airway or aspiration of water in the respiratory airway. Occasionally, once you get into water, this may lead to laryngeal spasm. So the idea is that the lungs are essentially dry. When we mean that the lungs are essentially dry, it means there is an absence of ingestion of water into the airway. Now, it is important to know this concept regarding near drowning. Near drowning implies somebody who had survived drowning, like the person had drowned actually, but has been rescued and survived for 24 hours or more. So it may be with or without complete recovery. Some may die, some may survive. However, the main determinant of mortality or morbidity is either injury to the brain, injury to the lung, or both. So basically, these are the main determinants of morbidity or mortality regarding near drowning. Now, regarding the pathophysiology of drowning, I will just talk about basically what happened in the setting of freshwater drowning and those that occur in saltwater drowning. Okay, so in freshwater drowning, essentially water gets into the lung, gets into the alveolar spaces. So there is a tendency for the water to get into the cardiovascular system, and this may lead to some form of hemodilution. Now, this hemodilution have effect on the red cells, which may lead to hemolysis or rupture of the red cells with eventual release of potassium. So the danger in terms of freshwater drowning is the risk of hyperkalemia, or in other words, some form of electrolyte imbalance. And hyperkalemia is toxic to the heart. It may lead to cardiac arrhythmia and, well, heart failure. Once the heart fails, the amount of blood that gets into the brain is affected, and this may lead to a condition that we call cerebral anoxia. So it is known that people who drown in fresh water tend to die within 4 to 5 minutes. Now, in saltwater drowning, the condition is a little bit different. Of course, water gets into the lung, but because of the increased salinity, so it creates some high osmolarity. So therefore, fluid will move from the vascular compartment in the lung and then get into the alveolar space. So the lung becomes very congested, or in other words, it becomes very, very edematous. There is no risk per se in terms of hyperkalemia. So they tend to die within 8 to 12 minutes following drowning. Now, prior to the autopsy examination, it is essential to review the scene as well as the history, the antecedent history. So we are interested in terms of the location of the body, where is the body found, okay, the position of the body and the condition of the body with regard to postmortem changes, as well as the temperature of the body. Victim identification is very important, so you may need to look for personal effects, look for any evidence of ID card, or in the absence of that, you may take fingerprint or possibly sample for DNA. This may aid in terms of victim identification. It is very essential to review the medical history as well as the social history. Does the individual have any risk factor, underlying medical risk factor, which may lead to drowning? It's important to review the psychiatric history. Now, Dr. Dexter had already made mention of the environmental factors and the condition of water. So witness account or witness statements is extremely important. As I've already mentioned, that drowning is a diagnosis by exclusion. So therefore, it's very essential to take evidence or some form of statement from the witnesses. Now, evidence collection and preservation also are important relating to these medical legal aspects of drowning. So at the end of the day, we need to make a lot of documentation, like a document narrative report, or if you have any diagram that may aid you, or photographic evidence, or any evidence that is essential in the examination of drowning.
Yeah. So insightful. So insightful, you know. So you couldn't get a certificate of participation. From the 3 hours, experts just spitting facts, as we say colloquially. 3 hours just spitting facts. That's thing to share the life about. That's thing to smash the emoji button about, so that we can inform more of our brothers and sisters. And just before we go, I know you all got places to go and things to do. They also talked about bloating, you know, bloating, right? When does a body float? You know, what happens when somebody drowns? They spoke to that tremendously insightful. Now, all the years we just know, you know, somebody drunk, somebody drunk, but there's no, that's as much as we say to the public. We don't go further than that. And that's why this is so enlightening. I'm certain, you know, other places in the world have gone on. But we stick at just drowning, just blanket drowning. So insightful. So you got wet drowning, dry drowning, freshwater drowning, saltwater drowning, and how all of that impacts on the body. Take a listen to them talk about bloating and allied issue.
A body has to be in the water before it starts to decompose.
The decompositional changes is mainly affected by the ambient temperature. So the ambient temperature or the temperature of the environment is the main determinant of the onset of postmortem changes. In other words, how rapid is it going to be, or whether there is going to be some form of delay in the postmortem changes. But averagely within 24 hours, okay, there is onset of postmortem change. As long as the body is submerged in water, we expect postmortem change to start. And the postmortem changes that may start, it's already been mentioned, there's this goosebump, and you may have, these are early postmortem changes. So the postmortem change could be early or late, okay? So goosebump, and then washerwoman's hand, in which there is whitening of the back and the front of the hand, and also whitening of the sole of the foot, both left and right. So as time goes on, let's say within 24 hours, 48 hours to 36 hours, there could be peeling of the body and degloving. So it's like the skin is basically peeling off, the same way a snake shed its skin. And then you may have bloating. Most of the time when the body, in fact, is being submerged, that is at the seabed, so it may float after 24 to 48 hours because of gaseous production in the body. So this may cause bloating, and it makes the body less buoyant, a bit light, and it floats. So most of the time, these are the time when bodies are recovered, okay? So as early as 24 hours, we expect onset of decompositional changes. At least the earliest form of decompositional changes, we expect that.
Yeah. As early as 24 hours. 24 to 48 hours, you heard it there. Between 24 and 48 hours, bloating and floating. Folks, you can go back and watch that presentation on demand. 3 hours, as I said, of the experts. This is not just conjecture. Spitting facts. Spitting facts. 3 hours. Now, if I remember correctly, Adriana Young went missing around 2. A search of the pool was initiated. 5 times it searched the pool between 3 o'clock on the 23rd. Almost a month ago, she went missing 23rd of April. Pool search umpteen times. And then on the 24th, around, I think, 9, 10 in the morning, you hear body in the pool. That's not 24 hours to me. That's not 24 hours. Floating in a upright position, in a standing position. Yeah. Justice. That's what we want. Justice. That's what we're calling for. We're going to leave it there, folks, and see you guys on our next broadcast. Have a fantastic day and stay safe. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We remember the Madia 20. Today, 2 years anniversary. 2 years since 20 students in the Madia female dormitory perished. 2 years since that. Justice. And we're close to a month. It's 23rd. It's going to be a month since Adriana Young went missing, found dead on the 24th. Justice for her as well. We're going to see you guys on the next one. Stay safe.